Hello, friends. I want to talk to you today about something most families never think about until it's too late, and by then, the mistake has already been made. If you own even one firearm, and someday you plan to pass it on to your children, your grandchildren, or anyone you love, then this is for you. Because here's the hard truth. A firearm is the one thing you can leave behind that, handled wrong, can turn a treasured family heirloom into a federal felony for the very person you were trying to take care of. We're talking up to 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine, all because nobody knew one rule. But it works the other way too. Handled right, you can pass down everything you own, protect your family completely, and in some cases do it without paying a single dollar in federal tax. Stay with me, because today I'm going to walk you through exactly how to do this the right way. And if all of this feels like something nobody ever explained to you, you're right, and it is not your fault. These rules are buried in federal firearms law and tax code, written in language designed to confuse, and the people who should explain them usually don't. So I sat down and went through the federal rules, including the brand new changes that took effect in 2026, and I pulled out 7 things every gun-owning senior needs to understand before they pass anything on. Some of these will protect your family from a crime they don't even know they could commit. One of them could save them a real chunk of money. And number 4 is the one that quietly turns an ordinary item in a safe into a 10-year felony, and most families never see it coming. So stay with me all the way to the end. Now before we get into it, do me one quick favor. If you're finding this useful already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. The families who stay informed about this handle it right and sleep easy. The ones who don't tend to find out the hard way, in a lawyer's office, after the fact. I'd rather you be in the first group. So subscribe, stay with me, and let's protect what you've worked your whole life to build. Let me start with the single most important idea, and it's one most people get wrong. A firearm is your property, yes, but unlike a watch or a car, it is not always legal for the next person to simply receive it. Federal law says certain people are not allowed to possess a firearm at all. We call them prohibited persons. That includes anyone with a felony conviction, certain domestic violence convictions, certain mental health rulings by a court, and a handful of other categories. Here's the trap. If you leave a gun to someone who falls into one of those groups, even your own child, even by accident, that can be a federal crime, for them and potentially for the person who handed it over. So let me ask you something. If you passed away tomorrow, could you say for certain that every single person you'd leave a firearm to is legally allowed to own one? Most people can't answer that with real confidence. The action step is simple. Before you ever put a firearm in your will or hand one over, make sure that person can legally possess it where they live. If there's any doubt at all, ask a firearm-savvy estate attorney first. The second mistake is one people make trying to be helpful. They think, I'll just give my guns to the kids now and skip all the paperwork later. It feels easier, but it can quietly break the law. Here's why. If you hand a firearm to someone, or even store it somewhere a prohibited person can get to it and control it, the law can treat that as that person illegally possessing it. There's a name for it, constructive possession. And there's a second problem. If the person you're giving it to lives in another state, federal law generally requires that handoff to go through a licensed firearms dealer. You can't just drive it across the state line and hand it over. Even within your own state, some states require transfers to run through a background check. So the action step here is, don't do the informal thing. Keep your firearms under your own control while you're alive, and if you genuinely want someone to have one now, do it the legal way, and check your own state's rule, because they vary a great deal. Number 3, some firearms are not like the others, and this catches families completely off guard. If anyone in your family ever owned a suppressor, what people call a silencer, or a short-barreled rifle, a short-barreled shotgun, or a fully automatic firearm, those are what the law calls NFA items, named after the National Firearms Act. These are federally registered, and they absolutely cannot be passed down informally. Not handed over, not just kept in the family, not ever, outside the proper federal process. Here's a question worth sitting with right now. Is there anything in your safe, or your father's safe, or your late husband's collection that might fall into that category, and have you ever actually seen its paperwork? Hold that thought, because the next 2 points depend on it. The action step. Take an honest inventory and find out whether any firearm you own or might inherit is an NFA item. If it is, it comes with paperwork and a process, and you need to know that now, not later. And this brings me to number 4, the one I told you to wait for. This is the mistake that turns an heirloom into a felony. Let's say you're going through a loved one's belongings and you find an old suppressor, or something that looks like it might be a fully automatic firearm. A lot of people assume, it's old, it's been in the family for decades, it must be fine. That assumption can land someone in federal prison, because if an NFA item was never properly registered, the law considers it contraband. That means no one can legally possess it or transfer it, period. And simply having an unregistered NFA item in your possession is a federal felony that can carry up to 10 years behind bars and a fine of $250,000. So here is exactly what to do, and please hear me on this. If you ever come across something that might be an unregistered NFA item, do not keep it. Do not try to sell it. Do not hand it to anyone. Contact the ATF's National Firearms Act Division and speak with a firearms attorney before you make a single move. That one phone call can be the difference between handling this correctly and an accidental felony. Now let me give you the good news, because there is some, and this is the part most people don't know. If a firearm is properly registered, passing it down can actually be very straightforward and even tax-free. When a registered NFA item goes to a lawful heir, it transfers on a federal form called Form 5, and that transfer is exempt from the federal transfer tax, by operation of law, as they say. And here's the part that's brand new. As of January 1st, 2026, the old $200 federal tax on transferring a suppressor, a short-barreled rifle, a short-barreled shotgun, or a category called any other weapons, dropped all the way to zero. Machine guns and destructive devices still carry that tax, but for most families that $200 barrier is simply gone now. The action step. If you're inheriting a registered NFA item, the executor files that Form 5 with the death certificate and proof that the heir is a lawful heir, meaning named in the will, or entitled under your state's inheritance laws. There's a bit more paperwork depending on the situation, which is exactly why a firearm-savvy estate attorney is worth every penny here. Number 6 is a timing mistake, and it's an easy one to make in the fog of grief. Say a parent passes, and they leave a registered suppressor to their son. The very next week, the son takes it home, because it's his now, right? Not quite, not yet. While that transfer paperwork is still being processed and approved, the heir generally cannot take possession of the item. Instead, the executor or administrator of the estate has to hold on to it until the transfer is officially approved. There's one exception. If the heir also happens to be the executor of the estate, then they're usually allowed to hold it while the paperwork goes through. So the action step is, do not move an NFA item into the heir's hands the day after the funeral. Wait for the approval, unless that heir is also the one administering the estate. It feels like a small detail, but possessing it too early is exactly the kind of innocent mistake that creates a legal mess no grieving family needs. And finally, number 7, which ties everything together. The biggest mistake of all is leaving it vague. A lot of folks never write any of this down. They figure the family will sort it out. But here's what happens when you don't have a plan. The law sorts it out for you, through your state's intestacy rules, the rules for when someone dies without a will. And those rules don't know or care whether the person next in line can legally own a firearm. They could hand your guns to someone who can't lawfully have them, and now your family has a problem on top of their grief. So do this instead. Sit down and put it in writing, a clear will that names exactly who gets which firearm. And if you own NFA items, ask your attorney about something called a gun trust, which is a legal arrangement built to hold firearms and pass them down cleanly. Just know a trust has its own rules, so it is not a do-it-yourself project. The point is simple. Decide now, in writing, with someone who knows firearms law in your state. So let's bring it all together. 1. Make sure anyone you leave a gun to can legally own one. 2. Don't do informal handoffs, especially across state lines. 3. Know whether any firearm is a registered NFA item. 4. Never keep an unregistered NFA item. It's contraband, and that's the one that becomes a felony. 5. Registered items can pass to heirs tax-free on Form 5, and most NFA transfer taxes drop to zero in 2026. 6. Let the executor hold NFA items until the transfer is approved. And 7. Put your wishes in writing, with a will or a gun trust. Here's the thread running through every one of these. None of this sorts itself out on its own. You have to know the rules and take one deliberate step while you still can. If this helped you understand something you'd never been told, do one more thing for me. Pass it on. Send it to someone who owns firearms, a spouse, a brother, an old friend, a neighbor. A single conversation like this one can protect an entire family from a mistake they'd never see coming. That's how we look out for each other. And one important note before you go. This video is for education only. It is not legal advice, and firearms laws differ from state to state and can change. Before you act on any of this, please confirm the details for your own situation with a qualified firearms attorney and your state's authorities. Take care of yourself, take care of your family, and I'll see you in the next one.